The NFL draft may be over, but if Adam Peters has a chance to add to his defensive front seven, an elite pass rusher would be just what the doctor ordered. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I'm your host, David Harrison, here with you every Monday through Friday. Your friend, your eyes, your ears, covering the Washington Commanders on the ground for WUSA9.com, also for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. I want to thank you for coming through today for this episode in which we are going to talk about some of the RFK site details. I know the news has been going around, so I've kind of condensed it into what I think are kind of the finer points, the things that most people are going to want to know about. So we're going to cover that, and we're going to do so with some aides from the mayor's office itself, so you know that the information is sound. We're going to talk about interior offensive linemen. We're going to talk about safeties, because when I polled the insiders following the NFL draft, what are the remaining three positions of need? Those came in second and third. The number one position group, edge. Not a surprise. So we're going to start off there on today's episode. If you're new to the show, I want to thank you for giving it a try, for finding us. Hopefully you enjoy what you hear on Locked On Commanders. It is a daily podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So be sure to come back again very soon. Every day, or those of you who come through every single day, I want to give you a special thank you for coming through today as well. For anybody out there, if you're not already subscribed for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this show, please do so at this time. So number one remaining need, edge rusher for the Washington Commanders. A curious lack of addressing the position suggests one of two things. One, that they think higher of the group than most of us did. I mean, media members, fans alike, national media, pretty much every layer of talking about the Washington Commanders from outside the organization agreed and had edge as arguably the number one need for this team. Again, they finished near the top of the league in sacks per pass attempt. However, it's the consistency in those sacks that you want to get. You have some 7-sack games, but you also have some 2-sack games. You'd rather have a lot more 4- and 5-sack games and try to get that type of mojo going, right? So a curious lack of addressing the position means either one, like I said, they think higher of their group than most people do out here, which look, they were proven right about a lot of things last year. So certainly potentially could be the situation, or they've already got an idea. They've already got either wheels in motion, or they've got an idea of what they want to do, or they know that there's players available. And honestly, when you look around the NFL, there are still edge players available who could come in and be a difference maker. Typically, we have the old saying of if they're walking around late April, if they're walking around early May, there's a reason. But when you look at the edge group, there are some guys walking around who actually could make a difference on an NFL roster. But there are also two guys who aren't just walking around. They've got teams that I think could potentially be on the trade market. One a little bit less confident that he's on the trade market or available for discussions, but hasn't been completely pulled off of it either. The other one we know was at least available for potential talks about trades. However, the team and the player have been kind of in a stalemate. So we're going to talk about those two guys first. The first guy we're going to talk about, TJ Watt, outside linebacker, Pittsburgh Steelers, turns 31 in October. Last season, 2024, racked up 11 and a half sacks, 15 or more. He's played, I should say, 15 or more games in 7 of his 8 NFL seasons. He's had 11 and a half sacks or more in each of those seasons, except for his rookie year. His rookie year, the only year of the 7 that he's played at least 15 games where he didn't have at least 11 and a half sacks. That is a dominant career. He's entering the final year of his current contract, which counts for $21 million against the cap if you trade for him as is. He's going to want an extension. Again, he's on the final year of his contract, going to want more guaranteed money, all of those things. Probably going to cost around a second-round pick to trade for an elite pass rusher who's in his 30s, who needs a new contract. Obviously, Steelers fans would love to say, no, it's going to take a first. Certainly, the Steelers would love to take a first. They're probably going to open the bidding at a first if they ever actually open in the bidding, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But I think ultimately you probably have to come off of a second-round pick or a package of picks that equal a second-rounder. Insiders around the Pittsburgh Steelers don't believe there's really any smoke around it, and they think that if it would take a quarterback to pull off the trade. If Aaron Rodgers doesn't come to Pittsburgh, given, who they have currently on the roster there in Pittsburgh, it would take a quarterback and then still probably some picks to make the deal get done. Not sure that Marcus Mariota, right, the Commanders' backup, I'd hate to see him go, but you know what I mean? Like if you're looking at who are the quarterbacks the Washington Commanders could potentially deal to the Pittsburgh Steelers to help sweeten the pot a little bit, it ain't going to be Jaden. Josh Johnson was available. Steelers didn't go after him. Sam Hartman, not going to be that guy. So really is Marcus Mariota. So Marcus Mariota in a third, like would that be enough for the Commanders to be able to bring TJ Watt over? Given that the Commanders brought in Josh Johnson, they'd have a veteran presence still in the room. They've got Sam Hartman there to be the third quarterback. However, after the draft, the Steelers did draft their defensive tackle Derek Harmon. After the draft, defensive coordinator in Pittsburgh, Terrell Austin, said, quote, I really like his explosiveness, talking about Derek Harmon. I like the fact that as an inside rusher, he'll give you some up the field push, some different things in there, working alongside probably the same side as TJ, which maybe should open some things up that way, end quote. So it doesn't sound like the D coordinator in Pittsburgh thinks that TJ Watt might not be around. So TJ Watt, again, a little bit more of a speculation, a little bit more of an idea, could happen, maybe. All this, he sent out this like cryptic tweet or Instagram post once or something that got all kinds of people spun up. So is there a real fire there? We're not sure, but people are talking about him potentially being available for trade. So if they're going to talk about it, we have no reason not to talk about it here on this program as we talk about this position group, because of course the guy that we've been talking about all offseason, once Myles Garrett gave up his rights to or gave up his principles for the money, is Trey Hendrickson, of course, from the Cincinnati Bengals. He turns 31 in December, 17 and a half sacks in 2024. He's played 13 or more games in each of the past 6 seasons, had 13 and a half sacks or more in each of those seasons that he's been starting in the NFL, except for one. Took him a little bit of time to become a starter in the NFL, but since then, he has been on quite the tear. He, too, is entering the final year of his contract. His contract would count for $16 million against the cap if he's traded for as is. He's going to want an extension because that's what this whole thing is about in Cincinnati. He has no guaranteed money left on his deal. He wants guarantees. He wants an extension, and he has said he doesn't want a short extension. He wants a long-term deal. Rumored price that Cincinnati was asking for Trey Hendrickson was a first-round pick. That is the rumored price. Not trading him during the draft, in my opinion, actually drops the price because the Bengals really have a poop or get off the pot type of situation going on here. Like before the draft or even during draft weekend, maybe you go draft a guy like we could do this, we could do that. We have options, guys. We could do whatever we want. Now you kind of don't. You're either going to pay him or trade him because he said he's not playing on this contract. So that's pretty much what the view is around the league. Now, outside of a bidding war, right? A bidding war could potentially escalate the price, of course. But outside of a bidding war in a vacuum, first round is not going to happen. The Commanders don't have a second round pick next year. Their second round pick belongs to the Houston Texans. So maybe the Bengals take 2 3s, right? A 2026, 2027 third, or perhaps a pick swap, 2026 Washington Commanders first round pick for Hendrickson and a 2026 second round pick. Basically, you value Hendrickson as a late second round pick according to the Rich Hill model. You basically trade 2 mid to late second rounders for a late first rounder. I don't know, could potentially happen. Again, Cincinnati did draft edge rusher Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M in the first round, hinting that Hendrickson could be on the move, but also hinting that maybe they're just going to get him a running mate. However, ESPN's Ben Baby, the beat reporter for ESPN that covers the Bengals, also points out that interior offensive lineman Cordell Volson and linebacker Jermaine Pratt would theoretically create enough money for Cincinnati to keep Hendrickson if the Bengals were to cut them. If that were the case, honestly, I wouldn't hate the Commanders getting either Volson or Pratt off the open market for record. However, that is a situation that potentially the Bengals would go. Then they have Shamar Stewart and they have Trey Hendrickson, and the Washington Commanders have not Trey Hendrickson and potentially not TJ Watt if there's really no fire burning at the bottom of that smoke. So that turns to free agents, current free agents available out there on the edge market. Von Miller, who's 36 years old, 6 sacks in 13 games last year. Matt Judon, who turns 33 in August, 5.5 sacks in 17 games last year for the Falcons. Za'Darius Smith turns 33 in September, 9 sacks in 17 games between the Browns and the Lions last year. Preston Smith turns 33 in November, 4.5 sacks in 17 games for the Packers or Steelers. Shaq Barrett turns 33 in November, only played 1 game last year, did not have a sack in it for the Buccaneers, 7.5 sacks in 24 total games the 2 years prior. So those are kind of the top free agents out there. It's not going to break the bank for any of those guys to come in. My preference would be either to trade for TJ Watt or sign Von Miller. Von Miller played 279 snaps last year. That's not a lot. The Commanders have Jacob Martin on the roster. Last year, he had 3 sacks in 11 games for Chicago. The 2 players, Von Miller and Jacob Martin, they combined for 501 snaps and 9 sacks between the two of them. You know what I mean? Dante Fowler played a little over 600 snaps, had more sack production than that, obviously. But again, the duo there, I think, could be decent, could be pretty good with Joe Wood Jr. scheme and Dan Quinn's defense, all that stuff. It'll also be good with za'darius Smith. If they want to go younger than Von Miller, za'darius Smith, turn on the tape. Von Miller, za'darius Smith certainly still look like they've got juice left. Jacob Martin certainly has juice. So I wouldn't hate any of those options there on the edge. But I think most of us agree that if you see the Commanders go somewhere, they need to go edge. Of course, they went kicker on Tuesday. We will talk about that in an upcoming episode. We're not going to dive too deep into it today because today we're going to dive deeper into the interior offensive line and the safeties, and we're going to dive into some of the RFK Stadium site information. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Game Time, who shares that there is nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Imagine being a Warriors fan and being in the arena for that wild finish in their most recent game against the Houston Rockets. Not so great if you're a Houston Rockets fan, but either way, hopefully you got your tickets stress-free, and the process didn't take away from the experience. It just added to it. With Game Time, they make it fast and easy to get those tickets, and prices go down as tip-off gets closer. They've got last-minute deals that can save you up to 60%. Those last-minute deals are not just good for sports. They're good for concerts, comedy, theater, pretty much anything you need to buy a ticket for. And the all-in pricing, you toggle that on the app, and you have no surprises when you get to checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Continuing now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Following the NFL draft, I polled our insiders and asked a very simple question. What are your top 3 position groups of need after the NFL draft that you would like to see the Washington Commanders potentially go out there and pursue adding to the room? Unquestionably, edge was number 1. I think every single voter voted edge number 1. Some voters voted edge times 3. Some voters voted edge twice and then threw in a third position group there. So the edge rush. So we just got done talking about the edge rushers. And as you see, whether the trade rumors are all accurate or some of it's just, smoke with no actual substance, whether, that's going to ever happen, the free agent market is still there with guys. Like I said, Von Miller and za'darius Smith are kind of my 2 favorites after watching their 2024 tape and all that. But let's talk about some of these other position groups. So the number 2 position group was the interior offensive line, which is not really a surprise because it's a position group that a lot of Commanders fans and a lot of media even went into the draft weekend saying perhaps the Commanders are going to come in here and take a stab at improving that area. Now, they didn't draft an interior offensive lineman specifically, but drafting Josh Connerly Jr. in the first round naturally creates some more competition inside because as the competition wraps up outside, right, you've only got one open position outside. Laramie Tunsil's your left tackle, period. That's over. Your right tackle, you've now got Josh Connerly Jr., the first-round pick. You've got Brandon Coleman, the second year, who's coming from left tackle experience. You've got Andrew Wiley, the veteran. You still have Trent Scott, who, by the way, plays tackle as well. So you've got no fewer than 4 guys who are going to come into training camp, come into OTAs, looking to compete for that job. Only one of them is going to get the job, right? We discussed a potential rotational situation between Josh Connerly Jr. and Andrew Wiley. And then if that happens, okay, 2 of the 4 now have a job, but the other 2 have to go compete somewhere else. Andrew Wiley, Trent Scott, Nick Allegretti, as Sam Cosmi continues to heal, like basically those 3, maybe Nick Herbig, you know what I mean? Like potentially could surprise some people and compete, right? But you've got 3 or 4 guys competing on the interior offensive line. So it's a good amount of competition there, but some people want to see more. So trade targets, not a lot of like sexy trade rumors for the interior offensive line, but I did do some digging. I did some research. And more so guys that could be available from deduction, right? Kind of just putting pieces together, less than the team saying like, hey, we're looking to trade this guy. The first guy I want to talk about, Cade Mays from the Carolina Panthers organization, turned 26 in April. So he just turned 26, started 15 games in 3 seasons in the NFL so far at guard and center for both Panthers. They've got a logjam on the interior. So Mays, who is on an expiring contract, could theoretically be available because you can't start everybody, right? So if you're the Carolina Panthers, yeah, you could keep him as valuable depth, but you could also maybe trade him. I don't know. Maybe you get a fifth round pick or so for a guy with that kind of experience. Who knows? Turn on the tape. I like him. He looks aggressive. He hunts for work, gets to the second level and doesn't just sit there and stand there in space. He goes to try to find a defender, and when he finds him, he attacks him. I like his tape. Zion Johnson, Los Angeles Chargers, former first-round draft pick. Well, he's a first-round draft pick, but he's a previous first-round draft pick, I should say. Turns 26 in November, so he's not yet 26. The Chargers this year drafted offensive lineman Branson Taylor in the 6th round. Now, he's not the direct competitor for Zion Johnson's job, but again, it's just another player that the Chargers are adding to that group themselves. They are expected to decline his 5th-year option. They've still got a couple days to make that decision, but the expectation is they will decline it. Typically, when a guy's option gets declined, there's a pretty good chance he's going to get moved in a trade, maybe working on a trade as we speak. Like literally right now, a trade could drop, and one of you watching this live on YouTube will tell me, hey, Zion Johnson is off the board, or Zion Johnson's coming to Washington, and we can break some news here on the show. He started at left guard. He started at right guard. The Chargers also signed guard Mekhi Becton, who you might remember had a career revival with the Philadelphia Eagles last year. So again, they also have a logjam of players in the interior offensive line. If Zion Johnson is not long for their team, they may look to try to trade him for some recoupment. You know what I mean? Again, probably like a 5th-round draft pick or so. Personally, watching his tape, he's a little lean. He reaches too much, but we'll get into my preferences here in just a second. Free agents. Will Hernandez is out there. Interior offensive lineman, turns 30 in September, coming off of a torn ACL in October, however, so I don't know where the medical is there. Obviously, that's going to be concerning. Dalton Reisner turns 30 in July. He started 19 games for the Vikings over the past 2 seasons. He's a guy that, this is how old I am, I remember him coming out from the NFL draft. Really like his attitude, really like his approach. Not sure that his game fits the Commanders, however. Jack Driscoll turned 28, so he just turned 28 this month. Played in 67 games for the Philadelphia Eagles in his career so far with 18 starts. My preference is, if you're going to go attack the interior offensive line as Adam Peters, either trade for Cade Mays from the Carolina Panthers. Again, I just like the way he moves. He's got center experience. I think that's great. You become your backup center, plus potentially compete for guard spot, and or sign Jake Driscoll, who also has tackle versatility. So you love that position versatility. But Jack Driscoll, the guy that I would go there for from the free agent market. Looking at the strong safety position, that's specifically what people wanted, strong safeties. The Commanders did add Kane Medrano, the rookie out of UCLA, who's kind of a hybrid linebacker safety type, right? But I put him more in the linebacker group than safety. He can cover the right matchup decently, but you can't leave him out there, all day, especially as a day 3 rookie, right? Looking at the strong safety market, again, not a lot of real smoke around players that are available, but some players who could just potentially be available from deduction. Jalen Petrie from the Houston Texans turns 26 in June. Last year had an INT, 65 tackles, 6 tackles for losses in 12 games. So he didn't play a full season, but you like his talent. I remember him coming out of Baylor. Really, really liked the kid. He's had some good moments and good years for the Houston Texans, but again, they have a lot of players in that defensive backfield, so could potentially be open to moving him. Amani Hooker from the Tennessee Titans is another one. He turns 27 in June, so he's a year ahead of Jalen Petrie. Last year had 5 INTs, 71 tackles, 4 tackles for losses, and 14 games. Again, not that the Titans have made him available per se, but he's just a player that when you look at their roster, you look at where they're going, he's potentially going to be available for the right call, for the right price. Neither of them is Jeremy Chin. Both of them are much more of a Will Harris or a Quan Martin. So, look, you bring Will Harris, Quan Martin, Jalen Petrie, you throw them all out there with, Tyler Owens, Jeremy Reeves, Percy Butler, and you just figure out who makes your roster and who fits your team, and you go for it. Free agents out there, not too exciting. Jordan Whitehead, second time around for the Bucs last year, and then they let him walk. So clearly they're not that in love with him. Julian Blackmon, Quandre Diggs, 5'9", strong safety. Not sure how I feel about that. None of the free agents really moved me, to be quite honest with you. Wouldn't hate a trade for either Jalen Petrie or Amani Hooker, honestly. But I'm not sure they make the defensive backfield better. More so just add kind of more of the same of what they have, just another player that does it. And there should already be some pretty solid competition back there. So while I would agree they didn't necessarily go get their Jeremy Chin replacement, there's also not like a Jeremy Chin replacement out there that I see anyway. So I think you're probably more likely set in that department. So coming up next as we wrap up this episode, RFK news dropped early this week. Insiders got a little bit of tease about it, and then the lid came off and everything came spilling out. But a lot of excitement, a lot of information going out there, a lot of words. I've got to kind of boil down into bullet format here. So I'm going to share all that with you, courtesy of the Washington, D.C. mayor's office. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that tonight here on Locked On Commanders, thanks to our friends over at Nissan. The Armada pick of the week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan in the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. This week, we're highlighting the top pick from our draft, the one selection that truly stood out, the guy who showcased the strength and power to push the team forward, the Washington Commanders forward into next season. And I think my player of the draft, the biggest steal, has to be Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the running back out of Arizona. However, the second biggest steal has to be cornerback Trey Amos, the player who has the most ability to impact the most areas of the team. I think would have to be wide receiver Jalen Lane, who's going to play a little bit of special teams as well. We'll be diving more into the rookie class. Don't worry, I'm not done talking about those guys as the week continues on. So when it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think these new commanders can do here in Washington. It's clear that our top pick of the draft is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders with the stadium news. We're not breaking the news, obviously. It's been out there for a couple of days now, but we're going to get to some of the finer details with all the information coming out. So a lot of it can get jumbled, so I want to kind of go bullet point by bullet point here and just kind of break some of this down. And if you're on audio, this is kind of like one of the few moments where I'm going to say this. I'm going to encourage you that when you have the opportunity, if you're on audio, you're probably at work or you're in the gym or you're driving, take the time. I think it'll be worth it. Go check out the YouTube version of this episode because I'm going to share images that the mayor's office, the DC mayor's office, has shared with us. And, you know, obviously the stadium rendering has made its rounds around social media as beautiful glass roof stadium. So here's the bottom line on the details, right? 180 acres of opportunities, basically what it's being called at the RFK campus. State-of-the-art roofed stadium is planned to be built on the site. No word 100% if it's going to be a retractable roof, a permanent roof, what have you. The roof that is in the image is a glass roof. I imagine that's probably a permanent fixture if that's the way that they go. It would be beautiful. You got the W in the end zone for Washington, obviously. You got the site of the Capitol building, and you have the Washington Monument in the background through the glass, I think, there. I mean, it looks beautiful from images, man. I'll just tell you that. So again, like I said, I highly recommend if you're on audio, when you have the time, go check out the video. But let's get into the details here. That's the site, the campus, right, is also going to house new housing, parks and recreation, hotels, restaurants, retail, and what they're calling other quote unquote neighborhood amenities. You got new jobs and revenue to DC. Specifically, Ward 7 is going to be benefiting from this. The Commanders, when it comes to spending, are going to fund $2.7 billion of this project themselves. That stadium is planned to be used year-round. Josh Harris, in fact, the managing partner of the Washington Commanders, told WSA 9's Chick Hernandez in an exclusive that he wants DC to become the entertainment mecca just the entertainment mecca. Like, everybody wants to come there. Taylor Swift wants to do her concerts there, and teams want to play football there. The Super Bowl wants to come there. The NFL draft potentially wants to come there. Just everything and anything you can think of year round. The stadium is not just going to be a football stadium. The district is going to contribute $500 million for the stadium, and non-vertical costs is what they're calling them from the sports facility fee. With this deal, the district also says they will not have to cut any of their operating budget. Again, that coming directly from the mayor's office. Now, the district is also overseeing the parking development using a $175 million revenue bond. So the revenue bond basically will get $175 million, and then the in-stadium activity, once it's operational, will pay that bond. Stadium seats will be approximately 65,000 folks will be able to sit in there and watch the Washington Commanders win some football games, and the launch is expected to be the 2020-30 regular season. 11% of the acreage will be the stadium, leaving approximately 160 acres for parking, hotels, etc. The Commanders are responsible for activating, developing various restaurants, entertainment venues, hotels, housing, green space, and more around the site. And the development is going to create 5,000 to 6,000 more housing units in the area, including at least 30% affordable housing. There's going to be a sportsplex planned near the area that is going to host year-round tournaments, for the various sports and leagues and all that stuff around the area. So that'll be there as well. Again, 8,000 parking spots are expected to be built. 14,000 jobs will be created for the construction of the site. 2,000 permanent jobs will be created once the site is finished. And again, it's going to create approximately $4 billion in tax revenue and more than $15.6 billion in direct spending projected over the next 30 years. So what's next? The timeline here, again, this coming straight from the mayor's office. Summer of 2025, council approval. That's a big hurdle. I say it's a big hurdle, but that's a big step. The DC City Council still has to approve this bad boy. Summer and fall of 2025. That's like things are already going to start. Planning commences for parks, housing, recreation. So information is going to be coming out about that. Fall and winter of 2026. The stadium site groundbreaking. That's when they're planning on getting the thing going for that. Plaza District groundbreaking will happen early 2029. Summer 2030, the Sportsplex is planning on being open, and then fall 2030, you get the nice new stadium. They provided a website, ourrfk.dc.gov, if you want to keep up with everything going on. I will be, we will be via the show. So you can come back here, of course, but you can also go to that website. Again, shout out to the DC Mayor's office for sharing that info and that packet with us so that I can share it with you here. And that is going to wrap up today's episode. Again, we've got more coming up this week. We've got a mailbag episode coming up tomorrow. In the meantime, if you have questions that you want to add or topics that you want to suggest for future mailbag episodes, all you got to do is become an insider. You can text them to me directly. To do that, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. You get the first 2 weeks for free, which means you can be part of the post-draft conversation, and you'll still be free when we go back to Ashburn for rookie minicamp. So you get a lot of stuff to experience it through. See if you like it. If you do, you stick around. If you don't, I always appreciate you coming through anyway and giving it a try. We've already gained a few more insiders since the NFL draft, so I appreciate all of the new folks, and I, of course, appreciate all of the folks who have been here for a while. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves are just beginning. We talked about it here on this episode. Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino talk about it over there. You can find that on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And as always, speaking of this podcast, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.